Hello, I'm Harley Schlanger. Welcome to our weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche, the founder and chairwoman of the Schiller Institute. It's October 27th, and we're now just days away from the opening of what appears to be the FLOP26 conference. There's a lot going on around this. The Queen announced that she's not going to be going, but there'll be plenty of genocidalists there. Boris Johnson says he's very, very worried. The Schiller Institute and CLINTEL, the Climate Intelligence Group, issued a very significant statement on this, the wake up call. Helga, where do you want to start on this whole question of what's going on with the climate conference?
The founder and initiator of the CLINTEL group, Gus Berkut, and myself, we issued this wake-up call by pointing to the situation that many people are concerned about this issue or that issue, what is most dear to their heart. And what we are writing there basically is one has to look at the whole picture, that we are in an absolute breakdown crisis, a civilizational collapse crisis with an acute war danger, acute hyperinflationary blowout of the system clearly coming, an incredible genocide in Afghanistan and Haiti, and that one has to look at this whole picture as a totality in order to come to the right conclusion. And then we confront that with the most important question, and that is what is underlying all of these policies, and what should be our policy, and that is the image of man. So I would urge all of you, our viewers, to immediately download this wake-up call and help us to distribute it. This is being done right now all over the world. Latest reports are that it's also being distributed in Glasgow already. So this is extremely important as an intervention, because this climate COP26 conference is supposed to launch under the pretext of that the climate crisis is completely out of control, and that the end of the 18 months which were given to the world climate by Prince Charles in 2019 is coming to an end, not because of the climate, but because of this conference. That there is right now to be expected, or what the intention was of the organizers of COP26, to basically say the climate crisis is so out of control that we have to impose the most rigid policies, which would mean severe austerity, which would end up in an immediate depopulation, especially in the developing countries, a complete destruction of the middle class in the so-called industrialized countries. So because that became very clear in the run-up to this conference, many countries are not coming. Putin is not coming. Xi Jinping is not coming. Modi, I don't know what the latest situation is. India is very critical and basically say if the climate crisis was caused by the industrialized countries, they should take care of it. China said very clearly that they take energy security as the first priority. Putin has blasted the environmentalist green policies in the West. So then naturally many developing countries know that if they agree to these deals, it means no development for them. So the chances that this monstrosity is not going to succeed are very big. However, there was an absolute scandalous article in the New Yorker, an otherwise prestigious magazine, with a so-called Professor Malm, who is a professor for human ecology at the University of Lund in Sweden, who says, and he was given an incredibly large platform in this New Yorker, that therefore it would be completely legitimate that there would be ecological terrorism following this conference, that it was okay to abandon the strategic policy of nonviolence and blow up pipelines, that one just has to be sure, very careful that one doesn't hurt humans, but to blow up all kinds of infrastructure related to energy would be completely okay. Now, that this is on the agenda should be taken very seriously, because if you tell young people over years, now it's about 2 years, that the world will end, and then a summit doesn't produce anything substantial, people may be induced to go in all kinds of directions. So this is extremely dangerous, and the science of it is not guaranteed at all. While you have, naturally, the IPCC report, which is the foundation of the Glasgow summit, this is being contested by a large report by the CLINTEL group, who say that they represent more than 900 scientists from 37 countries, and they completely put into question the scientific merit of this IPCC report, that it doesn't follow the standard of climate science, that they have wrong figures, they have used again the hockey stick model, which does not fit what happened in the last 2,000 years, and also all the interpretations they give are completely wrong. We will discuss this at a future program more in depth, but they completely challenge the merit of this report. Then naturally you have on the other side the infamous Nicholas Stern, who already produced a report in 2006, the famous Stern report, which fueled all of this a lot. He has issued a new report, again, sounding the alarm clock and proposing even more drastic measures. So this is a big battle. But the reality is all of this hype occurs because the financial system of the neoliberal system is blowing out. We have a hyperinflationary development which is completely out of control. And there is a very, very dangerous strategic geopolitical confrontation against China and against Russia, which brings us to the verge of war. And this is, you have the feeling that the present elites, they proceed according to the principle, après nous le déluge, after us come, whatever may. If we go down, we take the rest of the world down with us. And that is what we are up against.
Now, Helga, you mentioned a number of predicates here. Why don't we take a few of them at a time? In terms of this whole question of the effect of these policies, the massive austerity, we're already seeing the effects of this in Afghanistan and Haiti. We've put out a call for unfreezing the funds, getting the money to Afghanistan. There are some actions being taken by Russia and China, but the West is still showing the cruelest indifference as the winter approaches, hunger approaches. What can you say about this situation?
Well, it is getting more terrible, absolutely horrible by the day. The World Food Program and the FAO, they just have put out new figures that right now there are 22.3 million people of 38 million people in acute danger of not making it through the winter. This was reported by David Beasley, and and another person from the World Food Program, Martin Bauer, he said that there are 1 million children in immediate danger of dying of hunger and cold. And in light of that, the decision by the West, by the United States and by the Europeans to keep the sanctions by freezing the assets of Afghanistan, which are in the US Treasury and in other banks, amounts to genocide. I mean, first of all, these are monies which belong to the Afghanistan people, and withholding this money when you have what is now called the biggest humanitarian crisis on the planet. I mean, and that is we come to Haiti in a second, Yemen, Syria, all these other countries which are in dire condition, but Afghanistan tops it all. And by withholding the funds with the argument that one doesn't want to stabilize the Taliban, I mean, it amounts to people being killed by the millions. Now, Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, is just meeting in Doha with the Taliban, with temporary Prime Minister Baradar and Foreign Minister Mutaki. And Wang Yi appealed to the West, saying that the West should take a rational attitude and work with the Taliban. We have been talking to many people from Afghanistan. Many of them just were in Afghanistan and say you can actually talk with the Taliban because they have an absolute interest to stabilize the situation. So the whole propaganda that one cannot talk to the Taliban is completely wrong. Furthermore, by withholding the money which belongs to Afghanistan, you force the Taliban practically to increase the opium production because, if they have absolutely no money, what should they do? And the opium production it has been going, the drug production worldwide has been steadily increased since 2008 till 2019. The opium production has increased by 80%. The prices have gone up by 47% because the drug mafia always tries to stabilize the price, stockpiling what is produced too much, making the price cheaper so that more customers come, expand the market. And this is an absolute catastrophe because 750,000 people every day die worldwide of an overdose. So whoever is pushing the Taliban against the wall, has obviously no concern for the people dying. And obviously behind that is a policy to make Afghanistan a hellhole, so that it basically can be used as a source of chaos against Russia and China, continuing the policy of the great game, which otherwise lost because, NATO and the US forces did not win in 20 years. So it's a complete failure, but obviously some people rather continue this policy than recognizing, what was the mistake and correcting it. So this is really cause for alarm. And I can only say, if you have any concern about the poor people of Afghanistan and world peace, work with us, with the Schiller Institute, and try to change the policy in the United States and in the West on the Afghanistan question. Fortunately, the neighbors, the Central Asian republics, Pakistan, Iran, Russia, China, India, they all have a different attitude, but it is an absolute incredible scandal what is happening here.
And you mentioned that we have ongoing talks with the Chinese, with Afghanistan, with the Russians trying to do something, and now we're seeing an escalation against both Russia and China. Defense Secretary Austin was just in Ukraine. He was in Eastern Europe. And then we have the pressure being escalated around Taiwan against China, the announcement by the new designated ambassador to China that the United States is ready to stand up to China. It looks as though the war hawks are calling the shots, even though there is some discussion going on between the US and both Russia and China.
Yeah, I mean, there are different signs, I think, but if you look at the totality, I mean, the US is now pursuing through Blinken. I mean, Biden made this statement, that this was provoked by a reporter, and he gave this answer that, the US will defend Taiwan militarily. This was then, backstepped a little bit. But if you look at what Blinken has been saying, or Nicholas Burns, the designated new ambassador to China, I mean, they basically encourage Taiwan to pursue its independence, and waiving the perspective that the United States will come to the defense of Taiwan, which has been completely answered by China, saying this is a red line for them. They regard Taiwan as a province. The United States had agreed to the one China, two one country, two system policy. And just now, the Chinese Foreign Ministry answered to all of these provocations by saying this obviously means that the United States has abandoned the one China policy and has returned to a two China policy. There are articles also, in papers like Global Times, which basically say that if the Tsai government in Taiwan would go for independence and it comes to war, they would surrender very quickly because, the Taiwanese men don't want to fight. The Taiwan army is in a very bad morale and badly equipped. And, we had previously this whole discussion about, would then, if China wins this situation, which they would do very quickly, would then the use of nuclear weapon come into the play? So this is highly dangerous. This is just completely insane. And there is no good reason for it other than trying to, provoke China and to cause absolute havoc. And the same is going on in respect to Russia, where the incredible German defense minister, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, she said, that NATO is prepared to use all weapons, including nuclear, against Russia. Can you imagine that? So obviously, this has been answered by Russia. The defense ministry called in the German defense attaché in Moscow, protesting against this. Maria Zakharova basically said that she hopes that there are reasonable people in Germany who make sure that the defense minister is not trying to test out the readiness of the Russian armed forces, meaning, this is a potential trigger for military conflict. And then you have Stoltenberg, who is running around in Finland, offering NATO membership to Finland, which the Finnish said they keep an open door, but they don't go through that door. This is all one provocation after the other. And, given the fact that there is no trust between the great powers left, the danger that some accident goes wrong is extremely high. And I can only say anybody who is concerned about world peace should really wake up and understand that, this is the result of the fact that the neoliberal system is bankrupt. And, rather than agreeing to the kinds of reforms which LaRouche has proposed since many years and which are still absolutely valid to reorganize this bankrupt system with Glass-Steagall, national banks, and a new credit system, they rather go for confrontation while the system is getting more hyperinflated by the day. So this is something I can only call on you to mobilize with us with this wake-up call. Get in touch with us. Don't sit on the fence, because this is going completely haywire.
Well, and the indications we're getting from the population is the inflation question is now becoming very real for people. I want to just take a moment to look at that. We had this shift from the absurd formulation, as you pointed out, Jerome Powell's concept of transitory inflation was completely absurd, like possibly pregnant. And now they're talking about sustainable inflation. Yellen talking about 2 years, others talking about 3 years. This is now out of control, isn't it?
Yes, and that was clear from the beginning that you cannot pump trillions and trillions of liquidity into the system without that it eventually shows up. And it is like in Germany 1923, where the Reichsbank printed much more money than the German economy was able to maintain and support. And that all was not visible until the production came to a standstill when the French basically occupied the Rhineland and you had a strike and production stopped. And it's very much similar that now, because of the supply chains not functioning, which is another reflection that the outsourcing and all of this globalization didn't function. Now the inflation shows, and when now people call for an end to the quantitative easing, which some do, then you are confronted with the immediate danger of a complete blowout because the system is so absolutely over indebted. Now, the trick they are now using is to blame all of this on Russia, that the energy price explosion would be all Putin's fault, while the reality is quite different. We are preparing right now from the Schiller Institute a fact sheet where we will demonstrate that this present energy price inflation is a hoax, that it would be very easy to stop it. Putin has suggested to replace the speculation on the spot market with long-term contracts which fix the energy price for 5 years or whatever agreement is made. And that way you would immediately take out the incentive on the speculative bubble. Take Hungary, for example. They have a 5-year contract with Russia, and their energy price is much, much less. Poland, on the other side, which doesn't want to deal with Russia for their own irrational reasons, they have a contract with Norway. They pay twice as much. But if you would do, for example, what the Chinese are doing, who have basically installed a band where the energy price can only move in a certain period by 10%. That has immediately led to a collapse of the price because the incentive for the speculators was gone. And to stop the spot market speculation and to go for long-term contracts, and Putin has said Russia is willing to deliver as much gas and oil as desired, that would stop the inflation immediately. But that is obviously not what they want. Instead, the EU, in complete misregard for the interest of their member states, is now preparing a charge against Russia that they are not selling on the spot market. Now, this is incredible. Russia is doing what is in the interest of the customers to try to get to a lower price. Yeah, Russia has offered to lower the price by 60%, and the EU is attacking Russia for, with the argument that they are trying to corner the European market. I mean, this is so absolutely transparent. And I think, people have to stand up because we are looking really at an establishment which has gone completely crazy.
Well, Helga, on that, I think we can close this discussion out by going back to the wake-up call that was issued by you and Professor Burkhout. But I think it's also interesting to note what Putin had to say at the Valdai Club, which really was somewhat of an echo of what was in that statement in terms of the complete rejection in the West of universal values. Do you want to say something about that?
Yes, I think this speech by Putin in the Valdai Club, I could only suggest to all of you to read it because it's a rather comprehensive and outstanding speech where he basically, totally independent, since he did not consult with me and I did not consult with him, but he came to the same conclusion by saying that when you are confronted with unprecedented crisis, then the most important question which counts is the value of each individual life. And that is exactly the first point in our wake-up call, that in a crisis like that, you have to proceed from the standpoint that each life is actually sacred. And this has to do with the absolute the role of the human being in the universe, that human beings are the only creative species, that the perfectibility of man is in cohesion with the evolution of the universe, and that you have to start from that. And once you have an image of man which regards the human identity as the most important element in the universe, then you are not in danger to regard human beings as parasites, where you reduce them to just CO2 footprints and naturally then each human being which is not there is an advantage for nature, then you are ending up in this horrible tradition of the Gaia cult. And I can only suggest that you look at the speech I just made about that subject, because that, there is an epistemological background to what motivates the financial oligarchy, which is promoting all of these policies. So you should definitely look at that and get active with us. This is really it. So contact us.
And you can get the wake up call at the Schiller Institute site. And that's something that should be circulated to everyone. Every politician should be asked to take a stand on that. And then we have a conference coming up that's also up on the Schiller Institute website. And this is something that everybody should sign up for and encourage people to join. So, Helga, we covered a lot today. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.
Yes, till next week.